people start to call every single thing, like even like reasonable statements, as being like PC. Somebody might make the statement and they're like, hey, I think that would be cool if we had different incentives to kind of balance out the representation of men and women in a certain field.
Yes. Equality of outcome. One of the left's weakest talking points. Contrasted against equality of opportunity, which I think most people agree is something that we should reach towards. We want a level playing field. Everyone should have the opportunity to compete, even though not everyone will succeed. Equality of outcome, on the other hand, ensures that the output is equal. And that's what Destiny is basically arguing for in this debate.
Okay, so when you're talking about quotas, right? I mean, that's what you're kind of talking about with diversity in the workplace. You think it'd be better if certain sectors had more diversity. What are you basing that argument on, though? I mean, doesn't that come off as racist in its own way? When you're talking about, putting people in a position for a job, shouldn't they be the most qualified? Shouldn't it be merit-based? Why would we fill those jobs in with a quota just so it's diverse?
That's a pretty simple premise that I think most people would agree with. You should be hired based on merit, not by your race, not by your gender. If the breakdown isn't exactly 50-50 in the case of gender or whatever percentage by race, that's not a bad thing, as long as it's done on merit.
Women were closing the gap with men for jobs related to computer science fields, okay, programming and all that. All of the computer science fields, women were starting to catch up to men in terms of representation. That stopped, I think, around the 1980s, 1970s, when home computer devices started to become available for people in the homes. What happened is all of these devices were marketed towards men, towards little boys who played with computers. And what happened is, as all of these people came of age, that representation of women in the computer science fields not only stagnated, but started to drop off completely. Right? One of the problems that you run into when you talk about things like affirmative action and all of these things, the problem is you end up in a loop where a certain type of demographic does a certain type of thing. So advertisers only advertise to a certain type of demographic. And then what happens is you get in this loop where nobody from the outside will ever come in, because the only people being marketed to are the people that are already in it.
Yes. It's those dirty, dirty capitalists who don't want extra money by also marketing towards women. Like a lot of leftist arguments, we just have to pretend that there are no differences between the sexes, even though we know that not to be the case. Studies consistently show that men prefer working with things and women prefer working with people. This difference even appears to be present in 9-month-old babies who prefer boy-orientated toys like trucks and girls who prefer girl-orientated toys like dolls. Apologies for not having this study at hand, but I do recall reading that even when girls are given boy-orientated toys, like a set of trucks, they tend to pretend the trucks are a family, putting them to bed, etc. While trying to dig out that study, I found this one, that even monkeys display some sort of difference. Male monkeys prefer toy cars, and female monkeys prefer dolls. But Destiny's right. There's no biological component for these differences between men and women. It's all to do with those filthy capitalists and their marketing towards 9-month-old babies and monkeys.
Right. So the idea behind affirmative action is to try to break that cycle a little bit. Like, is it a little bit racist to prefer a black person, or a little bit sexist to prefer like a woman over a certain job than another guy or whatever? I mean, yeah, sure. If you want to argue down to the exact semantical definition of what is racism or sexism, sure. But the ideas are to try to put people on a more level playing field so that you get a better representation of them in society, rather than only creating these feedback loops that only favor a certain type of person for a job.
Leaving aside the fact that Destiny completely overlooked monkey representation, Destiny has backed himself into a weird corner where he's actually arguing for racism and for sexism.
All right, when we're talking about is it a little sexist, is it a little racist, I mean, are you making a for the greater good argument here?
Yeah,
we're going to do some bad stuff because it'll benefit us?
Well, but I don't know if you would consider it bad stuff, but sure.
Well, is sexism and racism not bad?
For what purpose?
Again, he's just backed himself into such a weird corner. You know someone's getting destroyed in a debate when they can't answer simple questions without a caveat. Is genocide bad? Well, I guess it depends. What's the purpose? But this is an important thing to point out, because it's common among left-wingers. They're so self-righteous and sanctimonious that they believe they can do anything to achieve their ends. I'm not usually for racism and sexism, But if it achieves what I want, then it's okay. To use a domestic example, we're getting hate speech laws forced on us.
Then I believe that it is our job as legislators to restrict those freedoms for the common good.
Or the example of left-wing socialist hero Che Guevara, who executed people by firing squad without knowing if they were fully guilty. We can execute you without proper trial. But don't worry, it's for the greater good, remember. I'm sure this does occur on the right, but I think it's more common on the left because they're so self-righteous in their goals. They're so noble and their intentions are so pure, so how could they be wrong? So anything is excusable in pursuit of the greater good, which they define and control, of course.
For instance, I prefer only women in terms of dating and fucking. Does that make me sexist?
Yeah, Destiny is right. He should be forced to date 50% men and 50% women.
I think that for certain purposes, sexism or racism, I guess, can be used, evaluating on race sex can be used to further a good thing. But I mean, it's specific to the example.
Even his example doesn't work. It's not sexist to prefer a gender. You can't help who you're attracted to. For it to be discrimination, it has to be unfair. I don't think it's unfair to have a gender preference when it comes to dating. If the reason you date exclusively women is because you're attracted to women, there's nothing sexist about that. If your reason for dating women is because you think men are inferior, then you are sexist. This is a simple and uncontroversial argument, but Destiny's just making stupid points because he's trapped himself.
I mean, when you look at socioeconomic status, straight white men are the best people off in the entire United States and have been for the entire history. I mean, I guess I'm not like, I feel like we're doing okay. I don't need a bunch of policy favoring me as a straight white guy. I don't feel that way.
Well, you're doing good. That's great.
This is such a scummy argument from Destiny, and it's why people hate identity politics. He has no remorse for someone who loses out on an opportunity because of their sex or race, something they've no control over. Shouldn't we be tackling the jobs with the highest rate of males? Like construction equipment operators, logging workers, bin men. You never hear the argument, oh, there should be more female logging workers, because they only want the good jobs. They only care about equality when it comes to the CEOs, the software engineers, etc. Look how much female skincare specialists there are. We need to fix that straight away. If you're a female and want to be a dentist, screw you. The bureaucrats like Destiny say there's too much women in that profession. Enjoy logging wood for the rest of your life. They don't care that 96% of work deaths come from males, because that's the good type of inequality, and we don't want to fix that one.
Fair to be unfair to them, because this is beneficial in your view to put a woman or a minority in there because you want to create a positive feedback loop.
Sure.
So if you're a male with a bad job, you're more likely to die. And if you're a male with a good job, we're going to discriminate and be unfair to you. Thanks, Destiny, for speaking for us white males.
I feel like we're doing okay.
I don't agree with that. I think people should be judged on their merits. I think if you're the best person for the job, you should get the job.
Wow, what a controversial bigot. The best person should get the job? What are you talking about?
And then use the excuse that, well, it's for the greater good. And in this context, we're going to go against our principles and say, well, sexism and racism, you can't do it anywhere else, but here it's okay. I think that's
No one said you can't do it anywhere else. You just have to have a good reason for doing it.
Yeah, come on. Racism is okay. That's not, you just have to have a good reason, a subjective good reason. Come on.
Sexism, like the maternity ward is only for mothers giving birth. Like, this is sexist. Well, no, of course not.
Wow. Great comparison from Destiny. That is a case of sexism. Why would the maternity ward, the place where people give birth to babies, be reserved for women? The sex that exclusively gives birth to babies. I can't think of a reason at all.
So you're not okay with giving mothers more maternity leave than fathers paternity leave or whatever? Or you don't think that, like, is that something that would be, you think that both deserve exactly equal?
Sure, why not?
Okay, I don't know. I mean, I could try to think of examples.
Destiny thinks he's got a gotcha and just gets shut down straight away. But even still, I don't think it's unfair to give women more maternity leave. It's not sexist to give women more maternity leave when they're the ones who have to recover from giving birth. Again, we're just acknowledging that there's a biological difference between the sexes, and we're catering for that. This is tangential, but Spain actually has a cool system of shared parental leave. So the man and the woman can decide how they split the parental leave. But it's not because of unfairness, it's to give the parents more flexibility. But what Destiny doesn't realize here is the answer is the same. Why women get more parental leave and why in certain jobs there are more men than women and vice versa. It's not because of sexism, it's because of biological differences between the sexes.
It was really, really popular to market video games towards boys. That's just how it worked. Video games were for boys, computers were for boys, and all of that just happened to be the way it was. And then as we've gotten older, if you look at like gaming societies, right, because that's what I exist in, gaming societies in the tech world, this is predominantly dominated by men, right? So if we don't do anything to change that, any kind of artificial action to change that, then into perpetuity, computers and games will continue to be marketed towards men, and that'll just continue on forever, and women will just never really have a big voice in that industry.
Obviously, the social aspect is a component of this. But how do you know advertisers aren't targeting males because males prefer video games? You could make the same argument about dolls. The only reason boys don't play with dolls is because they're marketed towards girls. And while there might be a social aspect, they're predominantly marketing towards girls because they prefer it, not the other way around. Again, we go back to the monkeys. Are female monkeys being marketed dolls, or do they just prefer them? If I were to make a company that sold dolls to monkeys, which I don't know why I would do, but if I did, I would market exclusively to female monkeys.
I think that women should be involved in the draft as well in combat roles. Yeah, I have no problem with any of that.
I think women involved in the draft is fucking suicidal. Women are physically weaker than men. Are you kidding me? There's absolutely no way I want them in a combat zone. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, but I'm sure there are some women that are probably more physically capable than the average man. Like, that wouldn't be surprising me. And not every combat role necessarily means you have a gun and you're walking out. Like, I don't know. There are other field positions too, but...
Even in his example, he has to walk it back. Yeah, there should be 50% women in the army, but not combat roles. You know, we don't want them doing dangerous things. Come on. Even in his hypothetical, he acknowledges that there are certain roles that men should do more of, because there are biological differences between the sexes. Just to say as well, sorry it took a long time for me to get this video out. I was busy with some personal stuff. But thanks for your patience, and hopefully the next one won't take that long.